No, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. I don't think that the picture you paint here is inaccurate, right? My main concern and critique is just that the negative things that each side says about the other, I tend to believe all of them in this case, right? I'm not dissuaded to the idea that perhaps Wayne has done more wrong than Oliver North or Chris Cox or Josh Powell in this situation. I just worry that any of them come off as being heroes in the story when they were all in on what was going on to a certain degree, at the very least, right? If that makes sense. And I don't think you necessarily let anyone off the hook. You talk obviously about Oliver North's own contract with Ackerman McQueen, which was a contractor for the group he was going to be president of, and creates a very obvious conflict of interest. Now, Wayne knew about that and suggested it, and then later said he didn't, right? And that's obviously a huge problem that you discuss. But that's my only point, is just that everyone involved in this situation had to make their own compromises to get into that position in the first place that probably fairly reflect poorly on all of them. Some of them it reflects much more poorly on, which I guess is the thrust of what you're getting at in this book, right? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to do here with Misfire is pull the curtain back and give the public the best view inside the organization that has been written to date. And I think I've given it my best shot here to try to give color to some of the names we've heard about, but really describe what motivates them and explain in detail what were the turning points for the National Rifle Association over the last decade.
Yeah. And I think you accomplished that goal, in my personal opinion. Because one of the things that's so hard to talk about sometimes when you're deep into this, because it's just there's so much that's going on that, like, even in this podcast here, it's hard to like establish, okay, who's Millie Hallow, right? You mentioned her. She's a key player that we're probably not going to have time to dive into everything that happened with her, but you do in the book. And that's what I really like about the book, is that I can point somebody who wants to know the ins and outs of how the NRA got to the point that it's at today, and who were the key players, and what are they like, and what were their motivations, and what led them to the places that they went. And I can direct them now to this book, at least, to have a more comprehensive place instead of trying to send them 50 different news articles. That's really where I think this book serves a real purpose for the average, person who's interested in on any side of the gun debate, really, or any side of politics, or anyone in America, really, who wants to know what's going on. Because it is a fair, I think, recreation of the last several decades of the NRA, especially the last couple of years when things have started to go sideways for the group.
And what I really wanted to do is put the reader in the room where it happened. I wanted you to be in the room when Wayne LaPierre finds out Angus McQueen has passed away. I want you to be in the room when Oliver North confronts Wayne LaPierre, and there's this climactic battle for who's going to lead the future of the National Rifle Association. I really want you to be in the room when NRA lobbyists are seeing what happened at Sandy Hook and trying to figure out what it is that the NRA strategy is going to be going forward after it. And that's what my hope is not just to kind of bring a comprehensive story of the NRA's last few years, but also make it a little bit immersive, that you can read along and feel like you understood who was there and what they said.
Yeah, and I think that really comes across. And one of the things I really liked about it as well is it's very easy when you're doing a critical look at the NRA, like this book is. It's obviously a very critical look at what's happened there and the people involved. But when you're doing that kind of book or that kind of writing, it's easy to fall into a trap where you just say, oh, this is it for the NRA. You know, look at all this bad stuff that's happened. Look at the trouble that they're in. They're done for. And I'm calling it, you know, this is my declaration that they're over. And you avoid doing that. And I think you're smart about it. And you also avoid the trap of trying to say that the NRA is manufactured power, right? That it's the money from the gun companies that make them powerful. You talk at length about how it's what really brings them influence in DC and in local state houses is their membership. Like they have 5 million dues paying members. There's obviously problems with perhaps recruiting new members, as you also get into here, but that's what really gives them power. And then what people have been saying the NRA is going away for 20 or 30 years, right? You make a point of that in the book. And you say, well, look, this is what these people are like. This is how they got to where they are, but they've made it through a bunch of scandals in the past, and it's not inevitable that they're going to go away now.
So to look at the history of the NRA over the last decade or 2 decades or 3 decades is to see an organization that is incredibly resilient despite all the controversies and troubles that they've been through. And not only that, Wayne LaPierre's kind of singular resiliency over the years, you know, a big question that I'm frequently asked is, if Wayne LaPierre is the way that you describe, anxious, weak-willed, cowardly, easily bullied, how is he the head of one of the most powerful and controversial organizations in America? How has he maintained that position for decades through all of the troubles that have happened, the mass shootings, the challenges on Capitol Hill, the controversies from jackbooted thugs, you'll remember in the 90s after the Oklahoma City bombing, to Parkland, to everything else that the NRA has had to deal with over the last few decades? How does Wayne LaPierre survive if he is all those things? And you know, my theory of the case and what I kind of lay out in the arc of this book is that over time, his malleability has made it that he's indispensable to so many of the powerful people around him, whether it's directors on the board or for a long time Angus McQueen. Now it's Bill Brewer and his law firm. You know, one thing that just fascinated me about Wayne LaPierre is he never really wanted to be the head of the NRA. They kind of failed upwards into it.
Right.
And this is no secret. In the 90s, he told the LA Times that he really just kind of wanted to own an ice cream store in Maine. That was his real, like, you know, as early as decades ago, he was crumbling under the pressure of being the head of this organization. And somehow he stayed. Maybe there's part of his personality that almost requires it. But I don't speculate about that. But what you do know is when you talk to folks who've known Wayne for a really, really long time, is that he's a real character. There are a lot of weird elements to him, including, by the way, the fact that he's not a very good shot and not particularly interested in firearms to begin with.
Yes, that's something you hear from people inside the NRA about Wayne. He's just not much of a gun guy. Not that that's necessary, I suppose, for his position, although obviously you might imagine that the person who's led the NRA... You might
imagine that the head of the
National
Rifle Association might be acquainted with rifles, or at least be able to use one safely and proficiently. Wayne LaPierre, though, there have been plenty of stories about how he hasn't used them safely or proficiently. One anecdote in the book talks about how he flags someone when someone calls out to him, and that there are jokes told at NRA HQ that if people don't do well, you might have to go shooting with Wayne. And of course, you know, there's been other evidence that's been out there that builds on that base. You know, like I'm sure you've seen the video that the New Yorker published about Wayne on an elephant hunt.
Yep.
Part of that is Wayne takes a shot, and then you hear in the background his guide say, "I was telling you not to shoot." And then there's that scene from the video in which he tries to shoot a wounded elephant point blank almost and misses on multiple occasions. He's just not, as you said, he's just not a gun guy.